It is early March and it is 1 month before your bees should be arriving. Are you ready? Let's go through the things that you are going to be needing, having to do that first month with your bees so that you are confident, you are ready, and you have as few hiccups as possible. Now, a lot of these things you don't have to do. Your bees will not die, but it will encourage growth. Okay, it is before your bees arrive and you want to make sure that you have your stuff ready for the day of. We have a hive stand. It can be pallets, cinder blocks, a hive stand you bought. You just wanted a good 18 inches off the ground, not only to save your back from hunching over when inspecting the brood, but to keep it safe from the smaller mammals like skunks that want to be nosing around. Then you want a bottom board. This took me like years to find out, but there's two sides to a bottom board. This one has a little bit of a deeper entrance than this side. So I usually go with the deeper entrance. You need to make the entrance smaller. You use an entrance reducer, a piece of wood for that. Then we're going to have our box full of frames. If it's a 10 frame box, put 10 frames in it. 8 frame box, put 8 frames in it. You want to observe bee space, or else bees will build funny comb off of your foundation. Connect it to the walls, connect it to the frames next to it. And you put your frames inside. I don't use foundation, but you can. Make sure your hive is level. This will also prevent bees from building comb across frames and off of the foundation in wonky little ways. Next, we're going to put a feeder on top. There are so many different kinds of feeders. The feeder you don't want is the one that goes inside the beehive where all the bees are. It's usually shaped like a frame, and the problem with that feeder is that in order to check on it and to see if you need to add more syrup, and then to add more syrup when you need to, you have to bother the bees. There are feeders you can put at the entrance. This is okay for this time of year, but I don't recommend them because ideally we want to buy a piece of equipment and then be able to use it the whole year. You can attract all kinds of other pollinators because your feed is right outside and it's a lot easier to access, and they can smell it. So I like to put my feed inside the hive. You can't leave your beehive open like this. What you will want to do is first have your inner cover, and then you will pitch your feed over the holes so the bees can access it here. So this is one I'm going to be using with my bees this spring. Once I have the feeder on top, you need to protect it with another box. And make sure that all your hives have a protective coating on them. You should have done this weeks ago because you don't want it to smell like bees. You don't want it to smell like paint. And if you have a beeswax coating, this is not necessary. You only paint the outside. You do not paint the inside. You're going to want your entrance reducer over the entrance. To start, I like to leave them the tiniest little entrance. They don't need a big space. A lot of my boxes that I made myself, I just drilled a 3/4 inch hole into the box and had a flat board for a bottom board. So they do just fine with that small entrance. You do not need one of these on your beehive, the queen excluder. I have my suit here. This is ready and waiting for me. I didn't wash it because you know what? Bees don't like the smell of laundry detergent. They don't like the smell of your flowery dryer sheet. Onto the bin. This is my fancy beekeeping bin. This is what I take out with me when I'm going to check the bees. I have my smoker. You want to make sure that you have a way to put out your smoker. Right next to me is a fire pit. Fire pits are good places that do not have dry grass, things that are flammable. Having a good stick that will plug up this little spout is great for cutting off oxygen so the smoker goes out faster. Don't put a hot smoker in something that can melt like this plastic bin. I have my book with some papers in it for keeping notes, along with a pen inside. Smoker fuel. There's lots of different smoker fuels you can use. I use pine needles because I have pine trees right there. When I was in Hawaii, I used the bark of the ohia tree because it shed its bark a lot, and it was in one of the bee yards I had. If the kindling you're using is like bark and it doesn't catch on fire so quickly, then you want something that catches on fire fast, like your egg cartons or dryer lint. I have my beekeeping gloves, lighter. Since my smoker is not lit and has not been lit for a long time, I'll put it in my bin. And what you're going to want to do is keep your beehive from doing that. So you don't have to have it locked so that it's faster and easier for you to get to open it up when you have your bees with you. But it's a lot easier to do this when there are no bees inside the hive than when there are bees in the hive. You want to just strap the hive together and to the hive stand so that it's not wobbling around and it doesn't get knocked over. I've had bees hives get knocked over by wild boars and cows, and I've had dogs come sniffing around the hive. And you know, animals have itches they need to scratch, and sometimes the beehive looks like a good spot. So right here I have my hive on cinder blocks and I have them turned the wrong way so I can't get the strap through it. These are all good things to figure out before you get your bees so that you can rotate the hive stand or whatever needs to be done so that you are ready for your bees when they come. One last thing that you do not have to do, but is good to have already, is a water source for your bees. Especially if you have a pool or a neighbor has a pool, you want to have a water source for the bees so as soon as they need water, they go to yours instead of finding something else, because it's really hard to get them to change where they go once they've already established a spot. So you can use entrance feeders as a water source. You can just take containers and fill them up with rocks and corks. You can buy water plants and have them in a little trough. You could put some mosquito-eating fish in there if you like. You just want water out there, and it's best to add 1 teaspoon of salt to every gallon of water, because this is an attractant that will help encourage the bees to your water. Some people say putting a little bit of dirt in the water helps. You just don't want it to be plain water, because that might not necessarily get the bees to first go there. Once they are already going to your water source, you do not have to continue to add salt. And of course, if there's fish or plants in there, don't add salt to the water. Now on to the feeding. You don't have to feed your bees. When you get them in a nuke, they are going to come with some frames of honey and pollen. And when you get a package, there will be a can inside that is full of syrup. But when you feed your bees, specifically sugar syrup, you are simulating a nectar flow. When the bees think there are flowers blooming and there is nectar coming in, then they will use some of this nectar to produce wax and build it into honeycomb. And that will give the queen more places to lay. She will be more inclined to lay. So it's important to not give them honey, because this will not simulate a nectar flow. This will just prevent them from starving. To make 1 gallon of syrup, you are going to want 12 cups of water plus 12 cups of sugar. So you're going to want 2 of these little 4-pound bags, and then you want a big container to store it in. I bought one of these water jugs, plus I have one of these large jars. You do not want to use brown sugar, powdered sugar, alternative sweetening sources. I know it might seem like this plain white sugar is the worst, and to a certain extent, it is the worst. It's been bleached. It has no nutritional value whatsoever except for sugar. But this is the thing. We just want to feed the bees sugar. We don't want there to be any minerals or anything else in there that can harm the bees. So what I have here is a pot. I have my sugar. I have supplements I add to it, and I have pollen. It's important to feed your bees pollen along with the syrup, because if you give them syrup without any pollen, this can stress the bees out. You know, their hive is now not in balance. So we're going to make the pollen patties second, but first we're going to make our 1-to-1 ratio of syrup. I have my water. And I'm not going to get into the specifics of what kind of water to use. If you have filtered water, use it. You do not have to buy water. I actually just want this jug to store my syrup in. So first, it's a 1-to-1 ratio of water to sugar. And I'm gonna put it on the stove and heat it up a little bit. You don't have to heat up your water to make your syrup, but when you make larger quantities, it's a lot easier to get the sugar to dissolve fully when your water is warm. You don't have to bring it to boiling though. It really depends on how much sits in your feeder. You have a feeder like this versus a feeder like this, because when you fill up this style, either of these style feeders, it's important that you fill it up all the way. If you don't fill it up all the way and you fill it up part of the way, it's not going to create that proper vacuum, and it's not going to have that slow little drip out the bottom. It's just going to be pouring out. So while that's heating up, I have my supplements here. Now, I have the Honeybee Healthy and the Honeybee Healthy Amino Booster. There's a few different brands out there. Pick the one that you want to use. And what this is, the Honeybee Healthy, is, you know, mostly just spearmint oil, lemongrass, sucrose, purified water. It will keep your syrup from spoiling when it is in the beehive, which is especially important when it is warm out. Commercial beekeepers, they more so use a little bit of bleach in their syrup, which is fine as well. In addition to it keeping the syrup from going bad, it also can be put into a spray bottle. You add this to your syrup and put it in a spray bottle. When you do that, they say that it can keep the bees from getting agitated, just like smoke masks pheromones. This has that scent, the lemongrass, the spearmint, and that can also mask pheromones. They're also covered, you know, in sugar syrup, so they're distracted. And this is amino booster, and this is not necessary to add to your syrup. This it just has some protein in it, which is helpful for the bees when they are rearing their brood. So first we're just going to make the syrup, and we're going to add Honeybee Healthy to it. And that is because some of the syrup is going to be used for pollen patties. Some of the syrup is going to be put into a spray bottle for the package that I have coming in a few weeks. And some is going to have this mixed in it into the beehive. Some people say to measure their syrup in a 1-to-1 ratio of sugar and water by weight. Some people by volume. From what I have read, it does not matter. And so I find it easier to measure by volume than getting out the kitchen scale and measuring by weight. So let's add in the sugar. This is pretty warm, so I'm going to shut off the heat. I'm just going to keep stirring this until all of the sugar is totally dissolved. And you want this to cool down before you add the supplements to it. So we have some time. Now that our sugar is dissolved and it is at room temperature, we can add our stimulant. We're going to add 1 teaspoon for every quart, 4 teaspoons for a gallon. Stir that up, and now you have your syrup. You could put this in your spray bottle when you get your bees to spray down your package before you install them. If you are ever installing a new queen from a cage and the bees are having a hard time accepting her, or you want to combine bees together, you could take that spray bottle with the syrup and you can spray down the frames. That will help mask pheromones and make it easier to combine bees and have bees accept queens. Now let's go make some pollen patties. This is dry pollen. It's called AP23 from Date Ant. There's a few different brands of pollen you can get. You can just buy pollen patties if you like. Keep them in the freezer. You can feed the bees just some dried pollen. There's an interesting video that Frederick Dunn made where he fed them outside the hive to the bees. And it says as dry feed on the directions, it can be fed dried or mixed with granulated table sugar and put it directly in the hive. And I'm going to give that a shot as well. And it's just this like dried powder. And we're going to make some patties. First we need a bowl and we need our waxed paper. Some recipes say to just add the pollen to the 1-to-1 syrup and mix it up. Here on the bag it says to do 1 part pollen to 1 part sugar. So I'm going to go with this bag says to do. I have 1 1/4 cups of pollen. I'm going to get 1 1/4 cups of sugar. I'm going to stir that up. And then we're going to add the syrup. And if you're a commercial apiary with thousands of hives or sidewiner with 50 or 100 hives, you're not going to be doing this. You're going to be, maybe getting 5-gallon buckets with cement mixers on your drill, or maybe getting big troughs and mixing it in large containers. Ugh, this does not smell pleasant. So we're looking for that cookie dough consistency. Some people add the dry pollen straight to their syrup and they don't make pollen patties. That's another option too. When it comes to this kind of stuff, there's a lot of different ways to do it. You just want to feed the bees. There's a lot of ways to cook chicken. Do what you're comfortable with and try different things. Or if you're too busy and you just want someone to tell you what to do, then do it this way. So now we're going to take our wax paper. Going to pull out a piece of paper, and you want to scoop a couple spoonfuls onto your sheet. Fold it over. And then use a rolling pin or a side of a bottle or your hands. Thin it out just a little bit. How thick do you want these to be? I don't know, honestly. You don't want it to be paper thin so that it snaps, but thinner is better, I think, because bees have tiny little mandibles. We're going to put these patties into the freezer until we need them. You are going to put this patty, take the top layer off, you're going to put it on top of the very top bar of your frames. You don't need to put it on top of your inner cover. If you have 2 brood boxes and you're still feeding your bees pollen, you're going to put the pollen on top of the top frames of your lowermost brood box, and you're going to put your second brood box on top of that. If you are in a warm climate and there's lots of small hive beetles, if you are in Hawaii, if you are in a lot of the southern states, you want to keep small hive beetles at bay. And pollen patties is a really great way to start a small hive beetle infestation. I have seen it quite a few times. So if that is the case, you want to put the pollen in your syrup, or you can give them pollen but a tiny little piece and check on it in a couple of days. By the way, this is parchment paper, not wax paper. You want wax paper so that it comes off easily. I just thought I had wax paper, but I don't. Okay, so it's the day your bees are arriving. You either made your syrup and pollen the day before or that morning and it's ready for you. You are going to go pick up your bees. You're either going to get a nuke or a package. A nuke looks like this. It looks like a Langstroth style hive, but it only holds 5 frames instead of 8 or 10. And a package is a screened in cage that has bees inside along with a queen in a cage. And when you go pick up your bees, first look at them. Make sure they're alive. You don't want to pick up a package that has a whole bunch of dead bees at the bottom. You want to, you're getting a nuke, open up the lid. You don't have to pull frames out and ask to see the queen or get too crazy about it. But just look and make sure that it looks like there's a good population. Your hive should be packed. It should be packed in there. It should not be loosely put together. When driving with bees, if they're in a truck, make sure you're strapping them down so that they're not going all over the place. And if it's cold out, you know, like 65 degrees Fahrenheit or colder, even below 70, consider putting them inside. If you have them inside your car or truck, if you don't have rubber mats, it would be good to put something down, put it on a piece of cardboard or something, especially if they are in that package, because that package has a can inside that's leaking syrup. And on that bumpy road, it could be dripping down onto the bees and into the floor of your car. If you have a nuke, you might want to bring a mosquito net with you. So just wrap around the box so that if any bees get out, usually they come in a cardboard, waxed cardboard box that's just like this size and shape. Sometimes they come in a wooden box that you have to return, or they keep your deposit, and just wrap it around this box so that the bees can't get out. Because sometimes with those waxed cardboard boxes, there's just little gaps where they put those together that bees can get out. You'd be surprised at how small of a space bees need that bees can squeeze through. Even if they're actually in the bed of your truck, it's also still good to have them in this kind of thing. And you're going to bring them home and you want to put them into the beehive. Now, the day before, you should really check the weather so you have a plan for what to do today. If the weather is going to be poor, as in it's going to be like below 70, cloudy, rainy, windy, you should probably hold off on putting your bees in the hive. With a nuke, that's not a big deal. You usually just put the hive right next to where you're going to put your hive, on top, or take your boxes off and put your nuke box where your beehive is going to go. If it's not in a wooden box and it's in that wax cardboard box, I like to just put some kind of board on top to protect it. Maybe one that's just a little bit bigger than the frame, the size of the box, so that it's protected from the wind and the rain, because the weather is poor, which is why you're not putting your bees in there. And then you can do it the next day. It's not really a huge rush with a nuke. They can handle a few days in the box, in the nuke box. It's just, you want to move them out before they get ready to swarm. If you're picking up a package of bees, now that is a little bit trickier to keep them safe if you cannot install them the day of. My first time picking up bees, it was delayed 2 weeks because of a storm where they were coming from, and then the next year I picked them up, but it was snowing on the way to go get them. We were driving from Philly to Harrisburg. I still put them in the hive, but you can also, if you have a package, you can just spray them with sugar syrup, especially if the can feels a little bit light inside. And then you're going to want to put some syrup that you made, put in a spray bottle, and spray down that package, and continue to spray them until you can put them into the hive. You also want to store them in a place that is cool and dark, so not too cold, because if it is, you know, well below 65, they're already starting to cluster up. A garage, unfinished basement, somewhere that doesn't get too warm and isn't bright, but putting them in the shed or leaving them outside or in your car, the bees will die. So you just want to install them as soon as possible into the hive if they are in a package. To install a package of bees, you're first going to want to get your feeder. Make sure it is full of syrup and it is on the side waiting. Then you're going to open up the hive. Take the inner cover off, the lid, and you're going to take a few frames out of the center. So I'm just going to take these 3 frames out of the middle. You're going to take your package. I don't have a package to show on this demonstration because I haven't lived in a place that sold packages in over a decade. You're going to take your package and you're going to spray them down with your sugar syrup. That same syrup you're feeding in your feeder, you're going to put some in a spray bottle and you're going to spray down the package with the syrup. This is not necessary, but it does help to distract the bees and keep them calm while you're doing this. So you're going to need a flathead screwdriver, a screw, and either a push pin or a stapler. You're going to, with your screwdriver, pry off the cap that's made of wood and it's on top. You take that off, you're going to pry out the can that is in the center, and you are going to take that queen in her cage out as well. And you're going to put the cap, that piece of wood, the square, back on the hole. Put the bees down. If it is really hot out, don't have them out in the sun to cook them. And you are going to take that queen in her cage and you are going to put her on a frame, hanging by the, she should be hanging by like this little plastic tab, the cage, and you're going to attach it to the center of one of your frames using a push pin or a stapler. You are going to take a screw and you are going to look at the bottom of the cage. There should be a candy cork or this like white stuff, hard white stuff at the bottom, and then there will be a cork. You're going to take your screw and screw it into that cork enough to get a good grab on it, just like you do with a wine bottle opener, and pull that cork out so that there is just the candy cork. Don't put the screw in so far that you're digging a hole into the candy cork, just enough to grab that cork, pull it out, so that the bees can now access this candy cork and they can release their queen. So you're going to put that frame with the queen on it in the middle, and now we're going to have this gap where our 3 frames are supposed to go. We're going to take our bees, we are going to take the cap off, turn it over, and give it a good shake so that a lot of the bees get out, and the majority of the bees. Do not be timid with this. It is better to give it a couple good shakes than to go like this and have nothing happen and to prolong this process. Now you don't want to slam the bees so that you hear this like noise of them hitting the box. Use your good judgment on this to get these small creatures out. Now there are people that will just put the package in the hive. There are people that will just put the package on the ground and let the bees climb in. You can try this if you like, but I'm telling you that this way I am showing you works, and it is the fastest way to have this process finished so that you can close up the hive and not worry about them, and that the queen will have the bees out of the package in time to surround her, keep her warm, feed her, and tend to her. When people don't get the bees out of the package by shaking it and let the bees get out on their own, it can take longer for the bees to get out and find their queen, and in the process the queen can die. So there's all different kinds of beekeeping and there's different kinds of teachers. This is the kind of teacher I am. I would rather just get it over and done with and let the bees recover than to baby the bees and potentially have them die. I also just pull a Band-Aid off really fast when my kids aren't looking. I don't ask them if I can do it and then do it very slowly. You're going to shake the bees in. Not all the bees are going to get out, and that's okay. You're going to put the package down on the ground by the entrance with the opening on its side so that the bees can crawl out and they can find the queen. Speaking of which, now that I'm thinking about it, to start, those first couple hours while the bees are getting out, you're going to want to take your entrance reducer off, just so that the bees can smell the queen's pheromones and they'll be able to find their hive faster. We're going to put our frames back in. You want to do this as fast as you can. It's not, don't make mistakes because you're going so fast, but do it as fast as you can. The inner cover goes on, and this is a little bit more important when it's colder out, the inner cover. In warm climates, you don't have to worry so much about the inner cover. Bees aren't going to be going up to your upper box and building comb all over the place in the next couple days. But in colder climates, it's good to keep the heat down in the box that the bees are in. And then we're going to put the feeder that's full of feed inside, and we are going to put the lid on the hive. You're going to leave them alone for 3 days. After 3 days, you're going to open up the hive just to check on that queen cage and make sure the queen got out. If she did not get out, then you are going to want to either pull off the screen of the queen cage or pull out the cork on the other end and wait for her to walk out. Hold the cage way deep down inside at the bottom of the hive so that when the queen gets out, she does not just fly up and away. And then close the hive up as fast as possible. If you see the bees being aggressive towards the cage, say you blow on it and bees fly off and come back very, very fast, then they have not accepted her, and you're going to want to take some syrup and spray down the bees a little bit more. But that, I've never seen it happen, because you know what, like these bees, this hive is totally new. They don't have pheromones from another queen to keep them from wanting to accept this new queen. So this is a time that you don't have to worry about the bees not accepting the queen, leaving the cork in the cage, and all of that stuff. This is, they're starting from scratch. Now, if you're picking up a nuke, it's a lot easier. What you're gonna do is, even if the weather isn't great, you can easily do this. Even if it's dark out, you can still install a nuke. You're just going to take the mosquito net off from around it. You're going to open up your hive, and you're just going to put the frames in right inside your box. You're going to take whatever frames out you don't need, leave them on the side. You're going to put the frames in the same order that they are in this box, and you're going to put the frames in the center with the empty frames on either side. Now later on I'll talk about what we're going to do to help encourage growth, but while you are just putting them in a brand new box and they just went through the commotion of driving and stuff, you're going to put them right back the way you found them. You're going to put feed in at the top, and you're going to leave them alone. I am going to talk later about when to take the feed off and when to add more boxes to your hive and how to encourage growth. But for this first week, you do not have to worry about any of this. Don't forget to strap the hive together when you leave, because it is not weighing much and is very easy to get knocked over. You can help the bees out by managing the space and making it smaller for them when you first get them. Especially if you have a package, this can really help your bees. There are two ways you can do this. So when you first get your bees, in addition to the installation part I just showed you, what you can also do is make that first box smaller. Instead of putting your bees into this box and closing it up, what you can do is get a nuke box, and you can put it right down on the bottom board of the beehive you're going to be using. Just drill a 3/4 inch hole into the front. They don't have to work so hard to keep warm and to guard. If you don't want to buy a nuke box, what you can do is make a follower board, which is super easy, and it looks like this. It is going to be a board that we put into our box to make the size smaller. So here we have our 10 frame box, but we want it to seem more like a 5 frame box. So we're going to take out 5 frames. Here now we have 5 frames, and this is going to be our 5 frame nuke. Then you're going to cut a board so it is the size and shape inside of your hive. And when you do this, you are also making the size of your beehive smaller. And that is it for your first week as a beekeeper. Congratulations. If you have the package, make sure you want to check on the queen and release her. If you have a nuke, just leave them alone for that first week. The only thing you are going to do is check on the syrup and the pollen. My second year keeping bees, I was at work and a coworker asked how my bees are doing. And I said, you wouldn't believe it. We opened up the cage and the queen was dead, so we pulled her out and she was just laying there on the bar. I was using a top bar hive, so we were talking about bars. My coworker looks at me and he is just cracking up. And I'm like, what's so funny? He said, there was somebody walking behind me and their eyes were bugging out of their head. He's like, maybe quiet on talking about queens on a bar that are dead. He's like, because you sound a little crazy. Okay, so your first week as a beekeeper has finished, and we are now on to weeks 2, 3, and 4. This rest of the month as a beekeeper, you do not have to worry about Varroa mites. You do not have to do a mite test, and you do not have to treat for mites. whether you plan to do it or not. What we need to do is we need to check on space, we need to check on food, we need to check on the growth in terms of the queen as well as honeycomb and food. How often you want to check on your bees is really up to you, but this is the way I look at it. We want to practice our beekeeping skills, not just keep our bees happy. And you know, ultimately the bees will be happier the more confident we are in our skills and what we are doing. So while the hive is small, open it every single week and practice your queen spotting, practice egg spotting. I have videos for both of these with lots of great tips so that you can find these things. Practice all of the identification, drones, workers, larva, pupa, all of those things. Don't forget to check out my Beekeeper's Toolkit where I show you all of these things and what they look like and how to identify them. I have my beekeeping calendar in there and my inspection sheet. So first, space. We have within our beehive the frames or bars, and the bees are going to start building honeycomb on them. This honeycomb is the foundation of the hive. It's where the queen lays eggs. It's where the bees store their food. It's everything. It's where they communicate. It's how they get around in the hive. And so as the bees fill up the frames, you are going to want to checkerboard. You do not have to do this, but it is helpful to encourage the bees to grow faster. Checkerboarding means that when you have a frame of honey, and then you're gonna, usually in the box, it always starts out with a frame of food, and then the developing bees, and then a frame of food. The food is always like the bread of the sandwich, and the brood is the meat and the cheese. And so you might have a frame of pollen first, and then honey, maybe not so much pollen. It varies hive to hive. So you're gonna have a frame or two of food, the nectar, pollen, and then honey, and then you're going to see a frame of developing bees, and you're going to see a few frames of developing bees, and then you're going to see another frame of food. And so you can start to checkerboard, which means you'll take that frame of food, that should be along the wall, take a frame of brood, and then you're going to put an empty frame in between of 2 frames of brood. And then you might put another empty frame in between 2 frames of brood. And when you do this, the bees don't like that hole between the brood, and they close it up. And they are more likely to close it up a little bit faster. If you're using a follower board in that box, you're going to take it out once you need space. You're going to have, you know, at least 3 of the frames drawn out, and then you're going to want to add more empty frames in there. You always want at least 2 empty frames in your box. So if you don't have room to put 2 more empty frames in, take that follower board out. And you're going to keep adding more empty frames. I highly, highly doubt you are going to be adding an empty box on top your first month. But if there is 2 empty frames or less in this box, what I mean by empty is that the bees haven't built anything in here, no honeycomb, nothing, not even a tiny little whatever, then you can consider adding a box on top. If you have your bees in a nuke, you can take them out of that nuke box now and put them in your full-size hive. The other thing we're going to manage is food. You are going to check to see how much food they have. But really, if they're still in this first box and you're not adding a second one on and they are still taking syrup, I would keep giving them syrup. If they are not using the syrup, just take it off because it's just a waste. Then we are going to be managing pests. There's actually nothing to do for pests right now. There's no testing you need to do for Varroa mites, and there's no treating you need to do for Varroa mites. Wax moths should not be a problem because this is probably new equipment. If it was old equipment, then hopefully you froze it before you put it into the beehive so that everything was killed, or you scraped it, torched it, whatever you did to kill anything that could have been on it. And small hive beetle, in most areas it's not going to be a problem because it's still colder out. If you live in an area that doesn't have a frost, or it's already has been warm out for over a month, then you know that there are small hive beetles in your area, then you can put traps on to start, or you can wait to see if you see adult hive beetles in your hive. Adult hive beetles in the hive are something I saw all the time in Hawaii, but there's usually, you want to put a trap under the lid and a trap on the bottom. Screened bottom with oil pan below is great for the bottom trap, and there's a whole bunch of traps you can put up top, beetle blasters and stuff. And then we have brood. We want to make sure that the queen is there. If you haven't spotted her yet, that is okay. Keep working on it. Make it that your first priority as soon as you pull a frame out to look for the queen. Don't wait until you've done other things to start looking for her. And most importantly, you want to check for eggs, because it doesn't matter if there's a queen in the hive if she's not doing her job, which is laying eggs. It can be really hard to spot them at first because it's going to take a while for the queen to get used to laying again, and she could be very spotty in her laying. She could be laying multiple eggs in cells. This is all okay the first month. You just want to make sure that she is laying. So if you don't see eggs but you see larvae, then great. Then that means that there was at least a queen that was laying there like 4 or 5 days ago. So you want to check to make sure there's signs of her. If you don't see eggs, then look for larvae. Look for brood. If there is no brood present, then if your population is high enough, go buy a queen and put her in as soon as possible. You just want to check to make sure something is happening this time of year, this first month. You just want to give the queen a chance to start laying. You want to give the bees a chance to start building comb and start gathering. You're just checking to make sure they're starting. Some bees get started very slowly, and some bees get started really fast. There's a lot you can do without opening the hive. Observing the entrance will tell you a lot about your bees' activity and whether they're bringing back pollen, because you'll see it on their legs. You see bees with their proboscis sticking out, meeting each other at the entrance. That means they're bringing back nectar. So a lot of beekeeping is observation, especially at this point. This is you learning. I know you read books and you watched YouTube videos and you thought you knew what you were doing, but this is really the crucial part in the learning. This is when you are the ultimate student, is you're the student of the bees, and you now have to learn from them. Okay, your first month is coming to a close, and this is what we want to do. We want to continue to manage the space. We are going to add another box on once this box is 80% full. So like you have 2 empty frames or less, you're going to put another box on. You want to check on their feed. You want to check your inspection notes and make sure that the amount of honey that's in the hive has been increasing. And once you add this second box on top, take that feed away. You want to continue to check on the brood and the queen. You want to continue to open it weekly for inspections, work on your queen spotting skills, egg spotting skills. You want to continue to observe the entrance whenever you can. You are going to keep an eye on the weather. Once it starts to get warm out, you're going to see things like bearding, a lot of bees hanging out outside the hive. You want to make sure that you have a water source, especially before it starts to get really warm out, so the bees can cool down their hive. You want to take off the entrance reducer once it starts to warm up so that the bees have more ventilation. And you are going to want to keep an eye on pests. Wax moths shouldn't be a problem. If you are ever taking equipment that has beeswax on it and putting it into a hive, make sure that you freeze it for at least 48 hours and you put it right into the hive. Don't let it sit out for a long time. Small hive beetles can become a problem once it starts to warm up. So what I did, because they were a huge problem in Hawaii, is I had a trap under the lid and a trap on the entrance. The trap at the entrance I like to use was a screened bottom with oil pan below. I have a link to that in the video description. I make absolutely no commission off of the sale of this, but this is the only place I've ever found that has them, and they work really well. The other thing you want to do is make sure there is not too much honey and drawn out comb in a beehive that has a low population. The frames should have bees on them. When there are frames without bees on them, but there is food and something for the beetle to eat, that's when they start to lay their eggs and the bees don't realize it. So that's just still a space management thing and not something you should have to worry about as the hive grows. It's something you're going to worry about in the summertime when the hive starts to decrease in population, but there's lots of resources on it. But the main thing in terms of pests you want to think about is the Varroa mite. It's still early to do a mite test. You don't want to lose population and potentially kill your queen, especially if you are not confident in your queen spotting skills. So don't worry about having to do a mite test for the next month or so. But you are going to really work on those queen spotting skills so that you know how to find the queen and put her aside so you can do a mite test and see what your mite levels are. Other thing you're going to want to do is put in a treatment. Now, I usually do not recommend treating just because, but this first year with your bees, as you're getting used to them and you just want them to be alive, like we're just making this our goal for them to be alive, we can work on all of the treatment-free beekeeping methods, growing an apiary with great genetics later. This first year, just keep them alive. And Varroa mites are the #1 cause for European honeybee colonies to collapse like worldwide. So give them a treatment to kill the Varroa mites, and this can be formic acid, Apogard, oxalic acid, Apovar. I will tell you that formic acid is a little tricky and you cannot put it in once it gets too warm out. And it also can mess with the queen's laying and the brood production. Apovar is really great. They all have caveats to them. Apovar is really great. It's just not incredibly effective in areas where there is a lot of beekeeping, especially commercial beekeeping. So for me in Hawaii, did not work anymore. Oxalic acid now has time-release strips, and it is a really great organic method to controlling Varroa mites. It's really my top recommended way to decrease the Varroa mites in your hive in the springtime. It has to be in the hive for 6 weeks. So once you have this first box on, that's when you would want to put in oxalic acid strips to lower your Varroa mite levels before a honey super is going on. And you're also going to want to learn how to control swarming. This prevention, usually you're just splitting your beehive, but there are other methods to controlling swarming. If you're getting overwhelmed by all of these things you have to do and you just want someone to tell you what to do, I have an online course where I show you how I keep bees through the seasons. It is the way that I have managed healthy colonies over the years. And I hope you check it out. The first month is free, and after that you can sign up for subscriptions or forever access. I would love to hear how your first month of beekeeping is going and any other tips that you have or things you want to add in, questions you have. My first week, I was so nervous. They delayed picking up the bees for 2 weeks because I ordered packages from a farm in Philly, and they just go down to Georgia to pick up the packages. There's a big storm in Georgia, so they couldn't pick up their bees. And when they finally rescheduled the pickup, it was for when my friend was going on vacation and we were starting together. So I was so nervous doing it all by myself. I attached a string to a cork and I planned to stand like 20 feet away and pull the cork out. It was so silly because the bees, they didn't care about me. They were so confused and everything was just new and different, and they were in that package, which I'm sure that they hated. So when I put them in, not a single one came out for a few minutes. And then when one finally did come out the entrance, it was just like poked its head out and like looked around and then went back in. They were very sweet, gentle bees. It's a shame they didn't stay more than a week. I hope your first month goes well. Thanks for watching. Check out my queen spotting video and my how to spot eggs video so you are ready for spotting these things when you get your bees.